going live. May have to go live. So Om Shanti, welcome to the Soul Cafe. We are going to have an interview. You just get one of my eyeballs on Instagram, but we're going to have an interview today at the Soul Cafe. And the topic is to understand something. You know, there's so many ideas associated with spirituality. And one of them is this idea of deep meditation, a deep meditation experience, which is known as tapasya. So we're going to maybe do, I don't know, a little myth busting, or at least explore what is tapasya and how to make it accessible to ourselves rather than this daunting phenomena, this deep meditation experience where I leave the body and circle around the globe a couple of times and come back. So that's not tapasya.
At least it would first be accessible. We're not just seeing one in your eyes.
Let's have a reflection first. So, sitting comfortably. Again, I don't need to have the body in any discomfort. Does not need to be any rigidity or harsh posture for the body. Make sure it's well supported and free of tension. This is the first myth we might bust around meditation. And I can do this if I want with the eyes open in a natural way. Just, I suppose, like someone who is daydreaming, but rather than my mind wandering, I'm going to be very focused with my mind, focusing my mind on something of profound interest to me, something I want to understand, something I feel is meaningful. And there is nothing perhaps more meaningful than the answer to the question, who am I? This is a question that is relevant to anyone, whatever their culture, religion, age, profession. Who am I? An authentic experience of the self. For that, I will have to turn inwards. I can't look outside to find the self, although I might have for quite a while. But I am here inside. I am the thinker operating through this body. I'm not the labels. I'm not the boxes. I'm not the outcomes. I'm not the image. I am me, the being. And there is an interest for me to get to know the real me. That interest will naturally pull me inwards, time and time again. It's not just meditation. It's a complete transformation of my inner world. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. So, I'm very much inspired actually by this topic from this morning's class, actually. And we did do a myth busting meditation 101 4-part series that was partway in February and March. So souls are also welcome to tune into that. It's all archived on YouTube. I think it might be called like English workshops or something, or public events, I believe. But I found it really interesting today in terms of this word that's in Hindi, but I'm sure there are similar words in different languages. And it's this word tapasya. And it's like this deep state of meditation. And I don't know if there must be some sort of word that's in English. That's our ideas of spirituality is basically.
I think, yeah. And I think one of the words, and I don't mean to disrespect anyone, but one of the words that was somewhat connected to it was Hatha Yoga. And this idea of, spirituality is something that, I need to make a lot of time for, and I'm going to have to go into denial to pursue. I'm going to have to, it's going to be a real carving out quite a significant space in my life in order to fit this in, make it happen. It's really hard and difficult and arduous. I mean, there's all these kind of harsh ideas connected to it, and a disconnection from day-to-day life. And there's something it's just not natural, if you will. There's something, the word supernatural was used this morning. It will require super heroic powers to be able to meditate. It's sort of, so we've put a lot of weight on ourselves around the word, which has sort of pushed it further away, made it very unattractive. And we should explain that the sort of traditional meaning of Hatha Yoga, when we're using that, it's a path of discipline, a quite intense discipline. So connecting to Tapasya, this is that image of basically someone wearing no clothes, having renounced everything, sitting in a cave far away from worldly life, sitting in a cave, not eating, not drinking, not sleeping, just in such intense, focused, concentrated meditation.
What's so interesting is that, I grew up, in the Chinese culture, and you can go to sleep, Judy. I'm going to talk about martial arts because I often refer to it, but I loved the culture of martial arts. That's what I really loved about it, sometimes watching the flying, Kung Fu, in masters are pretty cool. But what I found that was interesting was because there is this Cantonese word, tapasya. And in Cantonese, it's called Bai Guan. So if anyone who speaks Cantonese, you'll know what I'm talking about. But in these martial arts, these movies, the top master or someone who is really good, he would go to Bai Guan, and which is that he would go into this massive isolation for like days. And they never talk about eating or sleeping or anything, but they usually come out much more powerful, and they've come up with some new martial arts amazing thing, and they're extremely powerful. And so there is this massive intensity and discipline, actually, when I hear that word, isolation, intensity, power, discipline. So even the word power now has been, ironically, everyone does want power of some sort, and that's, it's capacity, but that kind of seems kind of scary for many,
especially if that's the only way to get power is to go through those very intense steps. And the isolation piece is so interesting because we want the power in our day-to-day life, this idea of harnessing that power and not really getting a chance to practice that power in day-to-day life. But I isolate, gather the power. I just see this quite a bit, even in the fitness setting, that sort of go into this, if you will, artificial setting, do some exercises, lift some weights, do all sorts of things. And then how does that apply to my day-to-day life? Yes, I will admit I've seen them lift cars when it's necessary or push cars out of the snow. But more the alignment piece is what we now call functional fitness. It has to be quite intentional, that I now want to do things that simulate day-to-day life, like doing balance work, not in a prone or supine position, but actually standing, moving around while I'm going in different directions or lifting things. I want to simulate. So there is some application of that power that's accurate, because it really can fall apart in day-to-day life.
So we often say Raja Yoga is spirituality in day-to-day life. We even call it easy Raja Yoga. And there's also, a reputation of spirituality being something, I'll use the phrase because it's just been used by others as being quite flighty and flaky, it's irrelevant as well. So there seems to be two very extreme perceptions of spirituality. Then if we're saying it's easy Raja Yoga, what does that mean?
I've always enjoyed the idea that it is remarkably simple. Simple. So this is the easy part, that we're making it, I guess, things a little more complicated than they need to be. And again, that makes it inaccessible. So these gymnastics and hoops and different steps I'll need to go through to have a spiritual experience, even when I think the spiritual experience is so, seems so inaccessible. So it's really simplifying what spirituality is and the method to attain that spirituality, and very important, the reason why I would want to do that. Part of what makes things easy for us is when we're very invested in the benefits, when we're really interested and committed to doing it. When we are not into something, when we're doing it out of compulsion and not out of genuine interest, even the smallest thing seems onerous. But when we're really invested, when we really feel there's benefit, there's that deep love, then it actually does make it, we experience it as easier.
It's interesting then, because I really was pulled to this topic because it is like myth busting in terms of like Raj Yoga, this word yoga, spirituality is actually meant to be a very enjoyable experience. It's very fulfilling. It's meant to be accessible. But when we talk about something love, I mean, I see bodybuilders, it doesn't actually make me want to do it, but they love it. They would spend the time to do it. They would dehydrate their bodies. So there must be like, how is this accessible to all of them?
I think, if we look at not what divides us as human beings, but what we have in common, what we are all interested in, that common denominator, if you will. And it really boils down to the two things that Raj Yoga focuses on: peace and happiness. So this experience of deep well-being is peace, like really at peace with myself, very comfortable in my own skin. And then to be able to hold that experience as I act and interact is the secret of happiness. So this is really something that is kind of interest to everyone. It doesn't matter. I think we're very touched when we see someone, as we are now, experiencing hardship on the other side of the planet. We say, that could be me. I can totally feel what they're going through. So there are things we have in common, and spirituality speaks to those things that we have in common. So it's really accessible to everyone. Now, not everyone's going to want to be a bodybuilder, and it is really harsh.
But souls really love it, and it's amazing.
Yes,
anything we find out there's discipline in everything we do.
There is. Even lying in bed till noon is a discipline. So religion of sorts.
It's interesting because when I very first started to offer meditation sessions, at work, and the soul that first came, she was actually very honest. She said, I hope you know, Nora, I'm actually very terrified being here. So there's this huge fear. And I know discipline was shared as one, but I know we often talk about letting go. That actually, letting go in spirituality, what is that connection? How is that accessible? Because some do find it terrifying, but they may not realize what it is they're terrified about.
I think spirituality offers so much benefit, but it is asking us to let go, and we have to finish that sentence, let go of what is not beneficial. So we just let go, and we don't quite get to the end of the sentence. Letting go is probably one of the most challenging arts for us. And so robust spiritual practice will always give us the understanding of understanding or realization makes letting go very natural. So it always takes time, not to force the letting go, but to understand our way into that release, that letting go. Then it's very, we tell many stories about this in the course, but it's very natural. Once there's this understanding inside, it becomes extremely natural. The other piece is that we don't let go to emptiness, which is what tapasya was associated with. Denial, letting go, renunciation. What we are doing is we are letting go to something more enjoyable. So we're that replacement. And of course, this is a huge dynamic when you're addressing addictions, is that you actually are going to use a replacement system. So we're going to focus on this, and look, we naturally let go of that. I think that's a really interesting part of tapasya that we are talking about.
It's interesting because I think you help to add that piece, but you're letting go of something while you're actually replacing it with peace. Because I was going to ask you about understanding, can it just take you so far? And for those who did have a chance to join for the interview, the Raj Yogi on Tuesday, and if you didn't, it's okay. But Judy gave this lovely example about someone she knew who was experiencing iron deficiency and just chronically was eating mince all the time. And she was aware she was eating mince. So there was some insight, there was some understanding there, but she can't actually stop unless she actually has something to replace it. So that was the part I was kind of getting caught up with, it, in a sense, was understanding to a point, but you still need some sort of cure or some sort of solution.
Yeah, so there was two things, which are the two pieces we look at in Raj Yoga, which is knowledge and yoga, or understanding and attainment, experiencing attainment. And so with that example, is it Pika or Pika? Pika.
I think it's
so.
Pika.
This soul in this example, yes, they were literally not even sucking. They were just chewing nonstop these mints. They were aware of it. They also found it a little odd, but there was such a craving for it. So the understanding piece, they were pulled to do a little research. The understanding piece is what they discovered, that they had severe anemia. And when you do, you get this craving for crunchy things of a certain consistency. So it might be ice cubes, it might be mints, which have a cooling sensation. So it's a particular experience that you're sort of craving for, but it's because of anemia. So that was the understanding piece. It wasn't just stop that and never discover that the cause of it. So we just have to know what the genesis or the cause is of that behavior, get to the seed of things. So this understanding piece is very critical in Raj Yoga. Right. But then I need to, okay, so I'm going to have to now address the anemia. So that's really important. And I might still have those cravings, and that's okay, they did. But now they were aware of what those cravings were about. And meanwhile, they were fulfilling that so-called deficiency. So the same thing happens spiritually. We have so many desires. I want this, I want that. Number one desire that we hear is, and it's never overt, it's never clear. It's just like the anemia wasn't clear. It's just, I'm crunching on mints. For us, it's this incredible craving to be respected. It's just almost every action that we perform, if we look at the seed of it, it's this craving, this deficiency in self-respect. Great. Now I know it. I'm still doing it. I'm still watching myself, but now I'm observing and understanding why. I'm not blind anymore. I understand. And now I know, okay, I need to address that deficiency, that spiritual deficiency. Where do I get that self-respect? Where do I get those very pure feelings towards the self? And this is where the second piece of Raj Yoga comes in, yoga, a source that can help to fulfill what I'm really craving. It would be, I think, just heartbreaking to ask a soul to stop doing certain behavior without addressing the deficiency. So I understand that there's a deficiency in this, and I'm introduced to the source where I can have that deficiency fulfilled. And I know it might take some time, so I'm very compassionate as I'm developing the relationship with the source. I'm compassionate as I watch myself still. I'm not going to lie to myself that I'm not doing it, but I'm now observing with compassion. I know why I'm going around trying to get that respect. And I am working on connecting to a source that will address the deficiency.
Would you say,
and that's Tapasya.
yeah, because it's connected, because we're talking about letting go. Like you can't really let go of, especially even these habits we have, mainly how we respond to ourselves, or how we react to things going on inside, unless we have some other attainments. But just when you were sharing, would you feel that in your experience of Raja Yoga that they come hand in hand, the understanding and the attainments, which is yoga? Like, could you, what would happen? Because I feel that many souls grapple with this, even regular students, that you're not attaining, but you're striving to understand. Like, could that be quite limited? You want to have this understanding of yourself, you're reacting, and you're not attaining. Like, can you really actually do that, if that makes sense?
Yeah, if I was looking at addiction, and I have a deep addiction with a substance, and I know it's killing me, I understand all of that. I need to taste something more gratifying to really get it, to really be able to grasp the contrast. It's a bit like when someone's engaging in something, and again, I don't want to disrespect anyone, but maybe a particular food that has a very pungent odor, or whatever the case may be, or fragrance, and I wear it all the time. I have no idea how pungent it is, no idea. But if I can taste a different experience, if I can actually go into a different state, and then I suddenly will be aware of the great contrast, really be able to understand, and that will motivate me. Because the interesting thing about addressing the deficiency from the source is it's going to demand that I only go to that source. I can't really mix, right? So it's not like I can have a little bit of drugs with, right? I really have to be able to transition off. And for that level of letting go, to experience the contrast in the heart really helps a lot to motivate me. I can understand theoretically, but to really be able to go through that practice of moving fully to that source that does address a deficiency, I need to experience it. It's going to give me the power to really, really release.
Do you feel that even the power to empathize with yourself, the power to understand yourself, also requires that you're getting some attainments?
Yeah, part of, we're talking about spiritual attainments. So this is going to affect the spiritual capacities of the soul, which is the mind, intellect, what I think, how I reason, or the heart, if you will. And so it's almost as if I'm coming back to my senses. There is a maturing of the soul. We actually get very melodramatic when we are deficient spiritually. And so with that maturing comes clarity, objectivity, especially around the self. I'm not so melodramatic. I'm more stable and clear. And this really helps a lot in managing the self.
This really helps us in terms of this aspect of tapasya, because where is this harshness, this discipline? And when it comes to this whole thing about letting go, And there's this, again, it's not about, it's just interesting what we do to try to let go. We're trying to avoid certain situations. We repress certain types of thoughts. We move jobs, we move countries. These are actually quite, well, first of all, those are really huge things to have to do. It feels like as if when it comes to trying to let go, trying to change to happen, that it always feels like there's so much labor. So now we talk about just tapasya, but it seems like it's about our entire life.
Yeah, we have a very interesting relationship with change. And I know that as we're doing this in real time now, it's Mother's Day here in Calgary, or this part of the hemisphere. Some might be in tomorrow, I don't know. But that energy of a mother, I'm always amazed at how much transformation they can nurture, to discipline, whatever, but it's in such a soft power kind of way. And that's, again, the piece about understanding. So it's almost as if we need to learn this art. For tapasya to be connected to mother is a very unusual connection. Totally. But it's such almost a cocoon feeling rather than a firebrand kind of feeling. Like it's of course intense in that there's transformation happening, but so subtle and so soft and so cool, because there's this sense of attaining in that experience, it was very beautiful, the poem we heard, but this attainment of pure love, pure regard that comes from the mother. If I'm able to experience that, for myself, but also if that becomes my basis of relationship with what we're calling the source or God, if that is my relationship with that being, then that's a very beautiful space to be in, where I'm just immersed in pure love, pure regard, and such transformation is happening, rather than cutting off both of those. I hear people talk about, yes, ego is killing us. We have to stop ego. We have to crush it. We have to kill it. And no talk about self-respect, about replacing it, about I'm going to experience self-respect. Oh, look, ego's naturally going away. Not rather than focusing on just bludgeoning ego as tapasya, it's like I'm going to have this very beautiful experience of self-respect. This is tapasya. Then I think it's a very different feeling, very motherly.
With your journey in Raja Yoga, what has your experience been like when ego is present? Because many find they grapple with ego. They don't even know it's ego, right? It just feels like themselves, and they're very critical towards themselves, not critical others, but more just talking about the self, and to feel that it's actually separate. But for your personal experience being in the study, like it's interesting, you're saying, oh, there's ego, like, to be able to, not be disturbed by it. It feels like you've had to have an increased experience of your real self.
You do. I mean, again, it's the self-respect. We just have to be so compassionate while that's developing. And in truth, ego just keeps morphing into more and more subtle forms. So we feel that we're getting somewhere there, that we're cultivating more self-respect, but ego then takes on another form to challenge that. But yes, I think it's super important. This relationship with God is really lovely, because this is the one being who actually sees us, understands us, values us as a soul. The rest of the time, we are valuing each other as, as physical beings, very, very external forms of value. And it's not trying to insult anyone, or, we want to genuinely value, but there's certain signs that we're doing that. It's conditional, it's selective, it changes very easily. So if that person does something, then I no longer respect them. I hear this all the time. I'm not making it up. Souls are constantly having these conversations where they don't feel respected by someone. So, and it's always down about external forms of validation. So, like, oh, they should give me a raise at work if they really respected me, or whatever the case may be. These are very gross examples, but this is the one being who really looks at me in such an eternal way, the deepest possible way, sees me and values that and says, this is the truth. That experience, as much as we love to, and we practice giving it to each other, but that practice even is nurtured by my experiences with that being. I learn it from God, so I can do this with other people, with other souls. That single experience is a game changer. And to me, that is Tapasya. Ironically, I think Tapasya became harsh because it was about, I am just cutting off ego. I'm going to cut off its life support. And very often, when you're dealing with a parasite or something, okay, I'm going to stop eating or whatever. Well, that's great. That's killing the parasite. That's also killing you. So, I'll never forget. I'm not sure which, maybe it was AIDS. But this, at one point, and we even saw it with the pandemic, people were starting to do some quite extreme things. But this idea of, it was discovered, yes, bleach does address the AIDS problem, but it also kills you. So, I don't want to do something that deadens me as well. I would like to come to life, but also let go of that which is damaging me.
It's interesting because when it comes to meditation, that some do enjoy the checking out, the zoning out.
Right.
It's better than pain. They may not even say that, but it's better than not thinking for many if all their thinking is quite negative.
So this is the concept again, the two things that everyone seeks, peace and happiness. And the terms that we use are liberation or mukti, and liberation in life or jivamukti. And yes, it's very beautiful, very blissful, very Zen-like, that checking out, that liberation, that deep peace. It's very beautiful. But for happiness, I actually need to check in. I need to be doing a practice that will be capable of being integrated into my day-to-day life. So the most, a good metaphor for this, the most obvious is I close my eyes to meditate. That's a checking out, right? I close my eyes to meditate. I'm talking metaphorically. So that's great, but I can't drive the car with my eyes closed, right? I want to maintain that peaceful, benevolent state, because when we're blissed out, we're like content with everything, right? I want to maintain that state as I'm driving the car in rush hour traffic with everyone doing their thing. I want to maintain that state. So I need to actually check in and have a practice that empowers that nature within the self so it can be integrated into my day-to-day life.
Can you define then what happiness means and even what peace is then in terms of what we're talking about? Because again, I've noticed that in facilitating sessions, souls are also grappling with what those two things mean.
So we suggest the basis of both those states is letting go, which is why we use the word liberation. So very simple. If I asked you to hold your fist really, really tight, like really crazy tight, this quite frankly is what our mind is doing. When we feel stressed or worried, we're just holding tight onto a particular thought, expectation, outcome. Eventually, this is extremely uncomfortable.
I'm getting a cramp.
Yeah, and so I want to let go, and that feels delicious. That's wonderful. And what that letting go looks like is I'm going to go on a holiday. I'm going to change jobs. I'm going to move. So I'm letting go by moving away. But what I want to be able to do is while I'm in that particular situation, not be doing it, right? I want to maintain that light feeling in that situation, just moving away, whatever. This gives me a very peaceful experience. So people will say, I just saw someone, it was fascinating conversation. They had been away from the family, and they're lovely. They have a second home across the border in the USA, and they'd spent most of the past 2 years there, and it was wonderful. And they set up this wonderful, sanctuary. Their home was how they want it. Didn't have to deal with any family dynamics, which are quite intense now. And they surround themselves with all the things they loved. And as they were describing it, everything they described was about an external arrangement. Everything. So as things would have it, they eventually had to come back. And they were almost in tears at the level of stress they were experiencing. As we were chatting, oh, it's the family, my house isn't the way I want it, and my schedule isn't the way I want it. All those externals were not available. So they had experienced peace. They said it was Zen-like when they were away. But then they were very unhappy when they came back. Right? Because that Zen-like experience was so dependent on checking out, right? At getting away from all the situations, arranging the externals the way they wanted. And if those externals no longer were doing that, they'd move again, probably. They just keep moving and moving. It's transient. So I want to stay exactly where I am, this checking in, connecting with these capacities that we have, these spiritual capacities inside, and being able to maintain that integrity while I'm in those situations. This is called happiness.
Do you feel that everyone wants that?
I think it would probably be very attractive, but it seems so overwhelming. When we're talking to somebody like, yes, that's where I have to get to. Am I willing to move on the journey towards that? Does it just seem like a mountain too high? I don't know, how we all have 24 hours in the day. How are we using them towards which objective? What's driving me? I can say, yes, I'm very interested, but then I always have to look at, but how am I using my time? We all have the same amount of time.
It makes me realize, though, these ideas, these deep set ideas we have about spirituality, how harsh it is,
Right.
how painful
I think ego
perhaps
is
maybe
harsh.
all of that is actually, it's not a small thing to try to let go of that. So like even like a session like this may not, because there's such deep set attitudes we have about spirituality.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most interesting things that spirituality asks of us, is to explore the beliefs and attitudes we're holding, some of which we might not even be aware we're holding on to examine them and see if they're serving the objective we want to reach. They might actually be taking us in the opposite direction, but we're so familiar with them, so used to them, maybe so addicted to them. It's quite, so is it easy, Raj Yoga? Yes, very simple. It's saying, you're a spiritual being, live that way. Pretty simple. But given where we're coming from, the tangled, complicated web we're trying to extract ourselves from, that's what makes it interesting.
Is it possible to be disinterested in things being difficult?
Becoming tired, yeah. I think that's when you really start to align with spirituality, because one of the ways, as you start to observe that the resistance to change, the resistance to spirituality works, is making things very complicated, difficult, expansive. And when I'm just too tired, just not interested in going in there, it helps me to let go of a lot of the thinking patterns that actually sabotage what I'm trying to do. I just am not interested in engaging in it. So it can be very helpful to have that disinterest growing. I'm not interested in expansion, overthinking, all of that, sort of those old kind of thinking patterns. Even as they still come, they don't engage me.
Does that help then in terms of these deep set attitudes? Like we may even feel like I don't even realize I have these attitudes. I've had souls say, I'm trying to stay awake or like me, but I can't help it. For some reason, I close my eyes and next thing you know, I'm gone.
Bye-bye. I think that in fitness, and again, this is us learning about ourselves. So these these sensitivities become more and more refined as we travel on. In essence, we get to know ourselves better. And we also get to know how the opposing team works. In fitness and movement, I remember being very young in ballet class, and we had no idea about alignment. We're just trying to figure it out. And it is the foundation and cornerstone of movement, just as awareness is the cornerstone of spirituality. So we just didn't know what's going on. And so literally, this was before there was many rules in the class, the ballet class, and working with underage now, but they used to do hands-on or adjusting us. So they would actually arrange our bodies into correct alignment. Literally, we're like clay and they're going, And in that moment, even though we did not reach that state on our own, in that moment, we could feel what correct alignment. We couldn't sustain it. We couldn't stabilize it. But in that second, it's like, oh, that's what right alignment feels like. And we had to record that. And over a period of times, we kept recording it. So then as I started to walk and move around, I could feel, oh, that feeling isn't there. I'm off. And that's kind of what we need to develop, a cut to the chase kind of approach, rather than thinking and thinking and thinking, getting more entangled. It's like, oh, that Om Shanti, that peace is not there. I'm off. I don't need to rationalize. I don't need to blame. I don't need to think anymore, actually. And so this is why Daddy Genki, one of the previous administrative heads of the organization, used to say, you think too much, or think before you think, right? That stop now. You should feel that you're already going down the wrong road. There's really no point in going further down this road. And I remember one scenario, it was very sweet. A soul was sharing it. It's very entertaining, and we are extremely entertaining. Once we're able to be light about ourselves and laugh at ourselves, I think things are really making headway. But they were sharing this story where they were speaking with another student of the spiritual practice. And it may have been a delicate topic, I don't know, but they're chatting. And the conversation kept going, but it kind of just felt sort of like their egos were actually just talking to each other after a while. And so one of them realized this was what was going on internally, and it's going, and he eventually said, you know what, let's just stop. And the other was like very maybe disturbed. Just there's no point. There's no point in continuing because of where we are. Like it's just, we might feel that and this is the thing about communication. To communicate requires everything, every action, art in day-to-day life hinges on the foundation, just as in physical movement. The quality of the movement hinges on the alignment. I often will cue people in class, especially if lifting weights is involved. Remember this happened once, they say it's a weightlifting, it's a strength class, so they all get their different weights. And, the first instructor, we're really going to focus really on alignment, because it must be clear to you that if you can't lift a light weight with proper alignment, how is that going to change with a heavier weight? Like what is the point? Because that's what happens very often. It's just increasing the weight because we're quantity focused, and bigger is better. And so they're starting to do that kind of, and I'm saying, I'm just going to remind you now, if your alignment is off, drop the weights. And I think almost everyone in the room put their weights on the floor, which is really unusual. They usually don't let go of the weights because their feeling is, I am valuable. I am lifting such a heavy weight. But they I sort of laughed because some of them actually had very good alignment. But it was,
it didn't trust them.
Yeah, but it was so fascinating that to really instill in us that putting more and more icing on the cake isn't going to make it better. And so really just to keep pushing in the wrong awareness, this is when communication kind of falls apart. So when I am speaking with someone, especially if it's a delicate topic, I always have to check, and I actually won't even engage if my alignment is off. I just know someone's going to get hurt, something will be misunderstood. And so it really, this awareness, this spiritual state is so critical to so many aspects of day-to-day life. So I want to be a tapasvi as I'm acting and interacting, not in a game.
Tapas means one who is doing tapasya.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's interesting because when we have the idea, okay, I'm going to be in deep meditation, I'm going to sit for 2 hours, and I'm going to really concentrate. I don't know if that's really appealing for the soul anyways, or if it's just ego who's perhaps.
It's absolutely lovely to sit for 1 or 2 hours, if again the quality of my experience, but definitely there's some who I feel like they're being tortured, they're torturing themselves, they're just kind of, there's not much going on, they're kind of, as you say, they're dying a slow death, falling asleep, they're forcing themselves.
It's not meaningful.
And it's almost like it needs a reset, a refresh. I'm not really engaged, and I'm pushing through. And then I'm developing the habit of that. And so I don't have a very positive relationship with meditation, with reflection. So we always suggest to kind of maybe let go of the word meditation, that I'm just starting this fascinating dialogue with the sound, conversation inside, and to be an investigative reporter of the sound. So it's very engaging. This might be a more meaningful entry point into my inner world, to be able to ask meaningful questions, to reflect on those, maybe not too concerned about the length of time, but just starting to develop a positive relationship with that inner experience.
I just wanted to make one comment before I ask if souls have questions. But that class, when you had asked souls, it felt like you had to realign souls, even mentally speaking, that the priority at this moment is proper alignment. The priority at this moment isn't lifting heavy weights. That it felt like as if to know that this is actually a priority, it actually gave souls the permission to let go of the weights.
I think once we sort of come to our senses, we say something sensible, it's kind of hard for us to deny, and that's really a speciality of spirituality, is it's kind of, identifying our senselessness, if you will, and it's hard to walk away from that. So for example, something simple like spirituality is suggesting that self-respect is the most important thing one can have. So then you can say to people, well, let's look at the opposite side. I'm going to move through my life with no self-respect. Does that feel okay? Just to admit that to myself, I'm going to go through the day with zero self-respect.
It doesn't always look like that.
It doesn't look that way, but that's what spirituality is trying to do, is to kind of snap us back to our senses, so then we can shift our priorities. When we realize what we're actually doing, then it's a little bit easier, because there is going to be a lot of resistance. Ego is a mighty foe, so it will resist. Anyways, I'm seeing the time, and perhaps everyone's fallen asleep.
Well, we did start late, so we just want to check in if there's anyone who has questions on Instagram or on Zoom or on YouTube or whatever platform you're on.
For your pitching.
Maybe we'll give souls a moment to reflect if you have any questions. But I had one question was that, what does one do when they have such deep set habits of no pain, no gain?
Yeah.
Because that's basic what our idea of tapasya is.
Happy Mother's Day, Shanna. I will be honest, if I look at fitness, that's a really difficult, I would say almost, and even this doesn't work, but it seems almost 9.9 times out of 10, it only happens when they become injured, a crisis. tends to shut that down.
Mm. But that breeds some sort of disinterest in
it
doing
does, or
things
the
in your own way.
realization, you know, one of my favorite stories around this was a lovely member who was very athletic. I mean, really had a history from childhood. I think it was rugby, so pretty harsh sport, as you know. And when you're young, it's okay, but it takes its toll over time without realizing it. So it got to the point when they had extreme back pain and problems. And at this point, they had 2 little boys. So they couldn't really play with their children. It was just extreme, and they're very young, but they were just extreme pain. And they were trying all sorts of different approaches to the pain. Eventually, they had to go to surgery, which is the last frontier you want to look at with back pain. So they had to do some surgery. I remember when they, even before the surgery, because the pain was so extreme, but they knew the importance of staying moving. And after, anyways, it was like incredible transformation in their approach to exercise. So much subtle alignment work, body work, subtle alignment work. So we often they couldn't afford a personal trainer, but whenever we walked through, we'd always stop and compare ideas about exercises, and because they were very hungry to get the subtle alignment work. This is not how they were training before, but now the quality of their life depended on it. And that included being able, they were very motivated to have quality time with their children. So unfortunately, and I think it's the same in spirituality, until things reach a head, a crisis of some sort, and it can be a subtle crisis, you know, just feeling so distressed internally. Everything can look great outside, but just so distressed internally that's when I find myself on the doorstep of trying to really changing, open to change.
Would you say then, maybe the final question, then would that injury actually be really a misfortune, or perhaps maybe a turning point, or a possible turning point?
Yeah, it depends on what they do with it. I mean, some, and you probably see many of these with the chronic pain, it can lead to a spiral down. But the ones that I meet, because they obviously are there, it's working out. So the ones, it's such an inspiring story. And I know we've shared the one before about the triathlete who was pulled under the truck and somehow survived, reconstructed. And years later, I'm chatting with them. And I mean, it was a really intense accident. But years later, they're in front of me saying, I'm so happy that happened, because my entire life was based on external validation. Their confidence was shattered. As they said, yes, they could reconstruct the body, but they could not reconstruct me. And so he realized the fact that his confidence could be so shattered, it revealed to him how fragile it had been. And he didn't know, you know, and so he really had to develop, just as we see physically, when the body goes through trauma, they really have to go back to the basics of physical literacy, of movement, and refine it and correct it and make sure, even as those are sitting there listening now, are you aware of the physical alignment of your body? Is it accurate? Most of the time, no. It wouldn't be
until you're feeling pain.
Until you're feeling pain, right? And then you're going to do something about it. So, so spiritually, it's even more subtle. Can I feel when things are off? How big does the crisis need to be to reveal to me things have been off for a while? So, okay, and then it's like, am I now blaming the crisis, or am I thanking the crisis? So many might just blame it and become very bitter and even depressed, but some might appreciate the opportunity there.
Well, thank you. Thank you for those who joined, and I hope we didn't put anyone to sleep, but it's such a powerful topic. I feel like we could go so much more deeper, because it was this fulfilling relationship with God is actually what tapasya is. And
thank you, Shayla. Yes.
And thank you.
Thank you, Leah.
So,
I hope it was okay. We didn't really give you a chance to.
Yeah, if you have any questions, please
express.
let us know. Yeah, there or
Yes,
comments.
Shayla. Right. So when I'm in the right alignment, that spiritual alignment, then I can definitely connect to God, who we refer to as Baba, Father. And thank you, Leah, for joining. So lovely when you joined. Thank you. And for all those who joined, thank you.
So we'll just remind souls on email as well. This is the new time slot, Saturdays at 5 p.m. Mountain Daylight Savings Time.
Yeah, I don't know where we are. Calgary time.
Yes. Maybe we'll have a little reflection. Okay. Thank you, Leah.
What is spirituality? What is this tapasya? Especially on Mother's Day, this feeling of embarking on a journey of love, of healing the relationship with the self, so true love for the self, and healing the relationship with the One who has such deep love for every soul, the Supreme Soul, God. It's amazing how much our hearts all hunger for love, to be valued, be understood, sometimes to be forgiven. And if I experienced that love, that deep sense of well-being, of value, might I live my life in a different way? What choices would I make? How would I treat others? How would I use resources entrusted to me? It's very powerful healing within to create a very healthy life as I move through the world. Om Shanti. Om Shanti.
Thank you for souls who have joined. Some upcoming events, we do have the Raja Yoga Hindi full course that starts next weekend. So it's the 14th, 15th, 21st, 22nd, I believe. So it's basically 2 full weekends and half day, 12 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. We always have our meditation experience sessions to experience soul consciousness and that connection with God. And those are on Tuesdays and Thursdays, Fridays tonight, and Sundays, 6:30 to 7:30.
In about 20 minutes.
So you're welcome to join us. It would be on the YouTube channel. But please visit the center's website for other upcoming sessions. And thank you for souls who joined on YouTube and on Zoom, as well as on Instagram. Alana, it's lovely to see you. Every time I think of you, I think of Grace, that quality. Fascinating how that changes your attitudes. We're talking about that so much during this session. So thank you for joining. Om Shanti.